Okay, good day, students. I hope you all are doing well. Um, so, I will just be making an overview of the tutorial that we were meant to have today, um, and these will be some guidelines as to how to approach the play that we will be covering. And the purpose for this is that you are doing, as you would have seen in your course reader, an essay assignment that is due by the 24th of April. So please go through that and see the requirements, as there are extensive details as to what would contribute to your mark in the essay and what they are looking for. So I will go through the play a bit and of the focal points for play, and I will go through some of the requirements of the essay. So yeah, we can meet as well for consultation after this. Maybe tomorrow I will be on campus, and next week one of the days, and we will communicate further on the group uh, regarding that. As you would have seen my email yesterday, there is a WhatsApp group, so please join for those who have not joined yet, so we can make our communication more efficient and convenient, and so that nobody gets lost or anything. So let's go into the play. So the play is called At Her Feet by Nadia Davis. And this is a play, very interestingly, it begins by saying that this is a play about woman, full stop. There's a hadith quoted. A hadith is one of the teachings of the Prophet of Islam, that is Muhammad. And the hadith says paradise lies at the feet of mothers. Paradise lies at the feet of mothers, as in the service of mothers, their duty towards your mother. Right? So these are things I just want you to take into consideration as we're going through the play, because we will come back to it. So the play opens up, a girl walks onto the stage. This is a play where, interestingly, there is a single character who is playing all of these roles. That in itself has a factor in this play, and I'll discuss that a bit with you afterwards. Huh? But just bear that in mind. So if you're there sitting and watching this play, which is how it's meant to be viewed and consumed, then this is what you're experiencing. There's a woman who comes out, and each time there's a different scene, she changes in accordance to the character that she's be representing in that scene. So the play opens up with the character Azra al-Jamal, and she says, "My name is Azra. It means unpierced pearl. It means that I am untouched. My name is something excuse me. My name is for something pure and unsoiled. My name is Azra al-Jamal, and I have just been killed, and I have sat in the middle of a circle of 40 men, and I have just been killed. I have felt my body break in different places and pieces of bone scrape through the skin, because there have been 80 hands throwing countless rocks at me for some time now, and I have felt my mouth bleed softly against sand, dry enough to make me choke, too thin for me to clutch. My name is Azra al-Jamal, and I have just been killed. Because I spoke to a man who was not my father, brother, or uncle or cousin, and now my father, brother, uncle, or cousin has taken rocks and flung them, knocked me unconscious, smashed my teeth, and made me scream and beg and say I didn't mean to, but I did mean to, and my intention doesn't matter now because I have no honor. I have no voice, and it is as though my name Azra Jamal, means nothing, because I have been ground into the sand now, curling up into a upward zero. I am circling my own end." This is the opening of the play. So what is happening here is that there is a little girl, and from what we can ascertain, she's born in a village that's heavily dominated by patriarchal beliefs and values. And she has been killed now for speaking to somebody of the opposite sex, right? Something that is, frowned upon in the in staunch circles, within certain cultures, right? So this is an extreme. This is an example of extremism, right? So she ends in her monologue. She says, "And somewhere between voices shouting angrily and hands saving me from a worse fate in the afterlife, I know there is still light. And I remember that it is a clear day, that the sun is hanging persistently at the back of my neck. The light is pouring in over secrets. That there are no shadows or doorways to hide in. That sharing words, using breath to make sounds, letting a voice come through the folds of this cloth is not allowed. It is a clear day, lost somewhere in the dark time. It is a clear day. Anyone who walks by now can see what is happening to me. Do you remember my name?" So then the play switches to another character, Sarah Jacobs. Right? But I'm going to skip ahead and just focus on the bits that we are interested in. But it is important for you to go to the whole play and all of the characters and look, it's short, right? So go through the whole play and just make sure that you properly understand each of these characters and their roles in the play and their characterization, right? Of course, for the essay, the character of our interest is Auntie Karim, right? But it's important to know the other characters' roles because, like we said in the beginning of the play, and something I'm going to keep coming back to, this play is about women, as in plural, right? So Sarah Jacobs, her part of the play opens up and she says, "I watched this documentary once about honor killings in Jordan. There was this girl whose name I don't remember. We know that this is Azra. She was killed for talking to this guy in the village," and I'm just looking sideways, right? Because the thing is sideways. Uh, how unbelievably barbaric. God, what an awful fate. It took me a few moments before I realized that it was the same one I was born into, and I was in quite a shock. I can tell you that this girl was about my age, I think, and her body was left lying somewhere. So there are some elements in this character's dialogues that are representative of cultural elements that these characters are influenced by. For example, you get a little tidbit say, for example, it was like watching a scene from the Old Testament, courtesy of CNN. It had all the ingredients: black shrouded figure being draped in the golden sand, woman wailing, men looking fierce behind big beards, young boys picking up rocks and hurling them at the cameras. You know how good Arabs are at throwing rocks. So you can see the framing of this, right? But who are these women? These women are hidden behind some layers of cloth with names like chador, abaya, burqa, or as Oprah says, burqa, right? So this is very telling of the perception of, uh, you know, this kind of culture, right? Especially, a perception of it that is grown in popularity, that many people hold these views, right? And we want to unpack this now and go into it, right? She says, "I've grown up watching my aunts carefully coordinating their scarves with their outfits," right? So this is telling that this character, especially this woman, they are very influenced by each other, right? In terms of their manners and their ways and their speech and their beliefs and the cultures that they adopt, right? Later on, she says, "People see a woman wearing a scarf and they think, ah, shame." Or they see a man with a piece of crocheted culture on his skull and think, terrorist, right? So these are just things I want you to bear in mind, right? Stereotypes, perceptions. Right? Now we come to Auntie Karima's part, and she is cooking, and she is with Sarah, and they are having a debate about Azra's death. So she says, "Okay, so you want to be sad about this girl? You've been talking about her for 20 minutes now, and I only have this to say to you, that there are always two sides. Barbaric. What's so barbaric? You telling me that this girl had no idea she was breaking the rules, running off to see that boy? So she breaks the rules and she must get away with it. Is that what you're saying? Let me see what you're doing. Uh-huh. She's cooking. Let's change her. That girl grew up her whole life in that village, whole life probably very happy. And must I tell you what happened? And so pause over there. I just like one of the questions in the essay is that you should pay attention to the language that Auntie Karima is using, right? And how this is going to change throughout the play. So I just want you to bear in mind, right? So they are, of course, talking about Azra's death, right? Which is something that's heavy, something that's very emotional, something that would have, if you knowing about the details, it shocks you right to your core. Right? So, of course, this has a heavy weight in the mind. This is what I want you to bear in mind as we're going through, right? Must I? Yes or no? Okay, I'll tell you. Radio. Don't look at me with a blank stare. You don't believe me? I am telling you. That village gets a radio from somewhere. Next thing you know, Madonna's bearing out Justify My Love like a virgin, and this girl thinks she can do as damn well she pleases. What do you mean the lyrics are in English? So, oh, because they speak Arabic? Yes, well, don't you speak about Arabic with your head uncovered. You act like it's any other language. And anyway, uh, then she's talking about pop singers and stuff like that. Uh, there are some lines that are telling of Auntie Karima's own cultural influences and how these are, for example, there's it's important to understand that there's a separation between culture and religion, and these two they influence each other, right? But they're not necessarily the same thing, right? So just something I want you to bear in mind, right? What? How come I know so much about them? Because I watch MTV. Oh yes. Why must your uncle pay good money for satellite if I don't have it on 24 hours a day? I can't be watching Big Brother. Those girls are so loose. What do you mean I should watch something to do with my culture? What do you think I'm going to watch? Easter Mosaic? This is not a Mora household. You want your Indian family, you go up the road to those people your mother married to. Yes, I know it's your father's family. You go there and you wear a sari with your stomach showing and make a mess with your hands and watch Monsoon Wedding and wave your arms about. So these are further lines that are telling of the cultural influences and the practices of the characters, and how, for example, how dress can variate between cultures, for example, also the characters have their own. For example, she's saying, you want your Indian family, you go up the road you might have met into. So these are also telling of the stereotypes that have been adopted by the characters. Right? In this particular instance, Auntie Karima, right? You remember well, it's the same thing. If you do something naughty here in the dunya, which means in this world, in this life, you will get punished sooner, if not later. I'm not saying she should have died. Only Allah can make that choice. But do you think that I went sneaky around to meet boys in your age? Never. Your grandfather was very strict. And I would have never married anyone he didn't 100% approve of. There's a big line there, right? I would have never married anyone that he did not approve of, right? Keep that in mind. Now look at me, alhamdulillah. Nice house, nice TV, nice kitchen, lots of kids. I am very happy. So, is she trying to justify here? Is she trying to set herself apart from... I'll reverse this later, right? So now, the character Aisha comes on, right? Aisha is a very interesting character, but I'll leave that for you to get acquainted with her, right? And of course, there is a Tahira Hussein, who we will talk about. She is a lady who works in a travel agency, and this is at the time of 9/11. 9/11 happens, and so she's a lady who's wearing a hijab, right, a scarf around her head, right? Her boss tells her, hey, you know what, Tahira, we are struggling to sell tickets, people, you're at the front of the business and people are going to see your scarf and then they get scared. And you should consider taking it off. And, so she has a long struggle with this, as you will see later on in her dialogue. and she is faced with the prospect of unemployment or going against her faith. Of course, we see later in the play that she is pregnant, and she's still at the travel agency, which tells us that story, right? Right, so we come back to, I'm just skipping ahead to Auntie Karima's second part in the play. Sure, it's damn hot today for the last 4 years. So page 48. Now pay attention to, remember the last part of Auntie Karima's, right? Now see how her language is shifting now with each different part, right? My family loves my cooking. That is because I now take a lot of time thinking about at least one thing that everyone will want. My husband Shafiq, he doesn't really like fish or vegetables very much. He's more of a meat man, and why not? He works hard all day, and we can't have the little pleasures, you know. But my daughter, Ya Allah, they couldn't. Now she has gone Mediterranean. And but come, Mommy, you must put olives and dolmades on the table. Dolmades, I ask. What is that? And then she tells me it's leaves. Yes, leaves stuffed with rice. It's Greek. Right? So remember in the last part of Auntie Karima's part, she is like radio, you know, and how she commented on how it's introducing foreign ideas to the people who listen to it, right? And it's a very stereotypical kind of justification, you know, quite hollow as well, of trying to understand, you know, because there is a perception of, you know, foreign ideas that come through the radio, you know, and there are a lot of people, for example, a lot of our elders would say, you know, where did these influences of these kind of bad habits or whatever you want to call them come from? A lot of people would say, oh, it's the TV, it's the radio, right? You know about this, right? So I'm trying to make that comparison with this here and show you how she is looking at the foreign food over here, right? Like the Greek food, and saying how this is a Mediterranean thing, and this is not something that is they are used to. It's all outside of their culture, right? So just something interesting to bear in mind, right? Stereotypes, culture. You know, my niece was here earlier, Sarah. I am very fond of her, and she has some strange ideas, but that's not her fault. She now went to a white school and has been at university for some time, so she tends to be, what's the word I'm looking for? The ambassador liberal, isi liberani, liberal. Oh yeah, yes, liberal. See the word liberal, right? Liberal, very accepting, or what's the better word? Tolerating. Yes, liberalism means all about tolerating, right? Yes, I know. And when I said to Allah, no, Sarah, you can't be black, and you know, the child got such beautiful straight hair, and you know, she isn't what a person calls African. And she whispers that, right? They couldn't. So you can see there are more telling lines about Auntie Karima, right? And her own beliefs, her own stereotypes that she's locked into, right? This next paragraph here is also very interesting, I found, right? But this girl she was going on to about, I know, you see, she was talking about all of these other things, but now the memory of Azra is coming back to her, right? Because obviously it's there in her mind, it's affecting her, right? But this girl she was going on about, I know I was being a bit harsh, but I mean, really? So now she's realizing what she was saying before, you know, that she was, you know, she's realizing the fault of what she's saying, what she said before. Why is she so concerned about this girl for? And these effing Arabs, they're always catching on cock. I mean, don't get me wrong, I also want to go to Makkah one day, but those bloody Arabs act like they own Islam. More cultural stereotypes over here, right? You know, you always hear these horror stories from people who have gone on Hajj, which is the pilgrimage, and they say out there that the woman may walk around in full hijab outside, but the minute they set foot indoors, it's net designer miniskirts. Yes, it's true. My cousin who went to Malaysia told me about this thing called makongs. Ya Allah, spiced beef made to taste like bacon. Bacon. Well, I am sorry, but that's just one letter away from haram as far as I am concerned. And we have a name for people like that here, Fatah Slums. So, look, bacon, which is beef, is perfectly acceptable, for example, to eat, right? For Muslim people, right? But look how she is making this justification, saying that because it sounds like bacon, that it's like one step away from haram. So you see, this is something that's like something that she is. It's a cultural influence, right? But it's also something, it doesn't make absolute sense. But because she's saying that it sounds like bacon, and yeah, you get where I'm going with this, right? So it's just her own way of making sense of this that doesn't really make sense, right? But this is what she's choosing to adopt and believe. You must understand that a lot of the things people adopt in their beliefs happen like this, right? This is what I'm trying to get at. Oh, I mustn't talk like this. Allah forgive me. And Mr. Jacobs would be so upset, but it really irritates me. They come down here and expect everyone must make a big bloody fuss, and skillik no one is saying Tamakasi or Kanala anymore. Oh no, now it's Shukran Afwan. Shukran, I mean, what is that? My mother taught me to say Tamakasi, so Tamakasi is what I'll say. Mind you, it's not just the Arabs say, it's the Charas also. They have a bloody field day with Arabic, where they are not saying G this and G that. And now, must I tell you something very quick? Something for nothing, very quick. They now know Ghal here, not here at, no, sorry. They now know Ghal, not here, all that long. They all come here maybe 2 generations ago. Okay, and she's talking about her Malayan culture and stuff like that. Right? Skipping ahead to the paragraph after the next one. My mother got married when she was 16. My father was 40. It wasn't so unusual then. Right? They settled down together and had 6 children. Me, my brothers, Mustafa and Ridwan, and my sister Fatima, Shami, Farida. Anyway, my mother and I were very close. From whence I was small already, I sat at this wooden table in the kitchen and watch her. Now she make pies. So, Vachno. Okay, she's cooking. Yes, so she's cooking, she gets into the food, right? Remember, the memory of Azra is in her head still. And then she comes to the part where it says, as she reminisces, she is struck by a memory that saddens her deeply. She begins to confide in the audience. My mother died when I was 10. For 5 months she lay in the bed, wasting away slowly while the doctor did what he could. My father was in the background somewhere, he couldn't make sense of it. She was so young and he was much older but still healthy. On the day of her funeral, it was dark, eh? It was so strange, it was dark, but it wasn't cold, just dark and grey. My aunties were all there crying. That same day, the Tukumanis, they took her into a room. I knew that they were going to wash her and prepare for burial, but I just couldn't go in. Maybe I should have, but the thought of my mother lying dead in the big tin washtub with hands sponging her skin, however lovingly, was not too much for me, man. So I stayed in the kitchen, sitting near the stove when it was warm, not really wanting to move or think. But maybe I should have gone into that room, because later, when she was wrapped in white sheets pressed with camphor and rose petals and lifted above the men's shoulders, ready to be taken to the cobus, I don't know what made me think that I could go with them, but I followed the men out the door and I tried to tag along and maybe make myself unnoticed, because you see, I needed to bury my mother. And one of the men, a stranger who walked close by the coffin, turned to me and said, "What are you doing? You know you're not allowed. Go back in the house." But you see, I kept on walking because I needed to bury my mother. I kept on walking until my father, his face full of pain, picked me up and carried me to the stoop of the house. I stood there crying while the woman went inside to make pies and tea and sandwiches with their grief. Auntie Karima searches for cigarettes, finding them, and sits down heavily and lights up, drawing deeply. Right. So you can just picture this moment. Sitting down heavily, smokes, drawing deeply. She's very pensive in this moment. So this girl, this Arab girl, I suppose I can understand her. I wanted to walk and she wanted to talk. That's a line I want you to pay attention to. It's a powerful line, right? How can we interpret that, for example? What does this mean? So Azra was killed because she spoke to a boy. She was speaking to a boy. That was not her brother, cousin, or uncle. And Auntie Karima, she is remembering this time where her mom had passed away, and out of the intense emotion, she wanted to be close to her mom at the time of her death, right? Now, in the Islamic belief, right, it is the men who take the body to the grave and bury it, right? Women have their roles in funerals as well, but this is the men's role, right? And she is saying now, as a girl, that she wanted to go and be a part of this and be close to her mom, but she was not allowed to, right? And so she's remembering this time, and she can, she says, look, this Arab girl, I suppose I can understand her. She's having this kind of sympathy with her. I wanted to walk, she wanted to talk. She was stopped from walking, right? Auntie Karima. Not like, but something like how Azra wanted to talk. Azra was silenced, right? But of course, it's a very two different examples. One is extreme and one, but this is a sense that Auntie Karima is having, that she can try and, because remember what she was saying in the first dialogue where she was like, what do you expect? This girl is going around doing her own things. But now she's changing her tone. And remember, one of the things we're focusing on is how the language Auntie Karima uses changes throughout the play. And look how she's come to this moment. Okay, then we go into the part of Tahira. Yeah, I'll leave that for you to read about. Then we come to the ending of the play, and there's Azra's mother speaking. Right? I just want to go through this quick because there's an importance here, right? So Azra's mother walks onto the stage, right? And she sits on the stage holding Azra's head in her lap. Your name is Azra, and you are my daughter. The Al Jamal, the part of you that your father claimed, is gone now, drifting through endless grains of sand that house your blood. And I am sitting here, holding your head softly in my lap, near to the place that I pushed you from me years ago. When I first saw you covered in blood and out of my womb, where I had kept you secret and safe for all these months, I reached out and wept that you were born a girl, not because I wanted a son. Pay attention to this. People often think that a mother's desire for a son is to please her husband. Not so. We don't want girls because we don't want our children to be prisoners of their own bodies. I want you to think about that line for a bit, right? I'm sure some of the girls will be able to understand that a lot if you think about it more and more, right? What does this mean to be a prisoner of your own body? Wrapped in cloth that hides you from the world the minute you start to bleed. The minute your body begins to speak of its power and its capabilities, wrapped, hidden. I hold you in a circle of gentleness and a flood of tears. There are no words now, no words for you or your life. That didn't happen, or the senselessness of your death. No words for the men that have lost their humanity and their connection to God through your murder. You are mine again, as I hold you close to me in an embrace of blood, so like your beginning. You are somewhere in the gardens of God, I know that. Somewhere with hills flush clean and water sparkling in rivers of transparent sweetness. You are in the arms of the most merciful, and at the feet of the infinitely compassionate. And I am your mother, and I send you greetings of peace, and I am the mother of memory, and I will bear witness, and I will not forget. And then the play closes. So this is an intense emotional ending over here. And very interestingly, that part of being prisoners of your own bodies, to the point where she says that she wished she never had a girl. She had a son instead. Why is this the case though? Because obviously, do you really think she means that? I don't think so. But try to understand the logic that she's explaining to us. Especially in patriarchal circles, girls, we all know, we've had this in our own country, right? Where girls are trapped behind principles of patriarchy that can go quite far. For example, we know during the apartheid, and we know during, we go more back in history to our times, and we understand the marginalization of women, which has been so in all cultures. We know, for example, when we're looking at this very extreme case in Jordan, in this village, it's a Jordanian village, we're not sure of the time. But we know, for example, if you had to look at other cultures, for example, women were kept from working, women were dictated how to dress, of course, many other things. Many other things. So, also makes you think about Tahira, who was made to take off a scarf. Right? So there is a battle here, right? There's some kind of tension here, right, between these women who have these beliefs, right, and the challenges that they are facing to hold on to their beliefs. There's also a notable something to note in that of the cultural influence on these characters' beliefs and the way they see the world and the way that they perceive that they are being perceived by the rest of the world. And also the way they perceive, for example, you can say where she makes the comment about Arabs. She's talking about Muslim people as well, but you can see how she separated them by saying these effing Arabs, they think they own Islam. And you can see how she makes the comment of saying these girls who wear full hijab, but the minute they're in the malls and stuff, they're in the miniskirts and stuff like that, which is just a stereotypical thing to say or something like that. We don't know if it's true or not true. It's just something that she's saying, right? A remark, right? Sarcasm, right? Right, so that's the play, and of course, you should need to go through the whole play and look at each of the characters' dialogues, but particularly focusing on Auntie Karima. Right. So let's go to some of the questions quickly, right? So there is an extract given, right? And this extract is the part where we just went through, it's just a while ago, about where she sits down and talks, and she says, I suppose I can understand that I wanted to walk, she wanted to talk. And the 2 paragraphs prior to that, right? Where, she's cooking, and then she says, but I followed the man out the door. She's telling the story about how her mom died and all of that she went through, right? I want you to also remember that in this part where she says that where she buried the mother and she wanted to be a part of this whole thing, so even though the rules dictated that she couldn't, you can see that in her childlike innocence, she wanted to still go against this, because this is the feeling that she had, the intense emotion that she was being driven by, right? And how did look how she was handled. Her father came and took her away, stuff like that, right? I just want you to also think about the way how Azra's situation was handled, right? Makes you understand the differences between the cultures, okay? And we can perceive from these the kind of intense, extreme patriarchy that is being held by, well, there's patriarchy everywhere, right? But the most extreme form of this is in the Jordanian village that Ezra is in, right? So you have to look at this extract in very close detail, right, in your essay, right? And these are some questions to consider, right? What is the essay question asking you to do? Analyze the question and break it down into its key elements, right? So we know here that you must contextualize the extract below, as in you must give context to the where this extract is fitting in terms of the play. How do you achieve context? This is something that a lot of you struggle with in the first test. So what is contextualization? It is to make sense of where this part that you are talking about fits in with the rest of the story. And how do you achieve this? By understanding the story in its full depth, by understanding each of the characters' roles and how they play off each other. Because each of the characters are individual, but they are connected in many ways, right? And remember, we keep on going back to the first line of the play. This is a play about women, right? All these women share common struggles, some worse than others, but they are all have this common denominator, as in the challenges that come with being woman, right? Consider how the language that is used in the extract shapes Auntie Karima's identity. Identity is a powerful word. There's a lot behind that. Consider the language, how it's used shapes Auntie Karima's identity. So we're getting to know all about Auntie Karima in all of these tidbits. Remember how I showed you how she has the stereotypical views. She has a lot of cultural influences. She is Muslim, but then she is also, it's like she won't eat bacon just because it sounds like bacon, which really has no basis in Islam. Folks, I'm just trying to get you to show that these are just small telling examples, but they are representative of her beliefs, which may mean that there are a lot more that she has. These are just some that are coming to us, right? Compare her language in this moment with one other moment in the play, and discuss how her character changes through the progression of the play. How her character changes. So we saw in the first part where she speaks, she's in a mood, right? And she's like, we know what happened? Radio, right? It's like, what? And then she's saying, this girl, she thought she could damn well, she pleases, whatever. And then the more and more she's thinking about this, the more and more she's realizing that she's out of line, to the point where, she goes back to cooking, she goes back to talking, she goes back to cooking, she goes back to talking, and each time, memory is bearing more and more weight on her. To the point where she finally comes and she sits down, she lights a cigarette, and then she says, this girl, she talks about her mother's death. She's being reminded of a traumatic point in her life, her own trauma. And then she says, this girl, I can understand. I wanted to walk just like she wanted to talk. Use your essay to explore Auntie Karima's narrative arc with a focus on her transformation. In what ways, if any, does she change, or how does her language reveal this? Explore Auntie Karima's narrative arc with a focus on her transformation. We're looking at her, how through these three parts that she has in the play, more, and how they look at the changes in the language to this. So there are quotations you can make that could be telling of how her character changes or transforms in these parts, right? I don't know about transformation, but for me, it just brings more of her own self is coming out with each of this, with the more and more this weight bears, and right? But if you want to use character, how you want to say that how this is how her character is transformed with this thought that she is thinking about, and how she is trying to make sense of it, because this is what she is doing at the moment. They are trying to make sense of this, right? And she changes as a result. Does she change though? That's what you say. If any, does she change? How does her language reveal this, right? So you can use the language to justify that, if you want to say that, right? Your essay, your argument must be supported with close analysis of the extract in light of the essay question. Make sure to plan your work, giving each paragraph a clear focus. This focus should be stated clearly in the opening sentence of each paragraph. So there's a very particular instructions there, right? In this extract, Auntie Karima saw a lady in the kitchen sitting near a stove, and in the next paragraph, and one of the men, the stranger, walked close to the coffin, and then the last two lines where she lights a cigarette, and then she talks about the Arab girl. Each of these paragraphs, right, you need to pay special attention to, and you need to talk about them separately in your essay, okay? So make sure you pay special attention to the essay to do this per extract, but do not think that the whole essay is based on this extract. You need to contextualize, which you can only do by having a good understanding of the whole story and demonstrating that to us, okay? That's not to say, don't tell us now what is happening in the whole play, right? Just contextualize this part in the play, wherever you feel what may be necessary to explain yourself better, right? Because end of the day, it must come across through the reader that you have a clear understanding of the issues at hand. You must be, the way you explain things in yourself, right? And something that many don't do, but I'm just going to remind you again, this focus should be stated clearly in the opening sentence of each paragraph. So when you begin each paragraph, you need to state the main idea of it before you get to breaking it down, okay? So maybe it's a good idea to put your quotation or the part that you are referring to in the opening sentence of the paragraph, right? Contextualize the extract. What has just happened? Who are these people? How does Karima's attitude affect her tone concerning Azra? See, you can dissect her tone and how it changes throughout the play, right? Something good to pay attention to. How would you describe her attitude in this scene? And how is it different to her attitude elsewhere in the play? Remember I was talking about that? What influences a change in attitude? Identify specific languages and phrases, right? These are helpful for your answer. What are the connotations of following words? And they got a bunch of words here, right? These are just useful guidelines. Obviously, you can't talk about all of these. You only got 1,000 words. But these are just guidelines as if to what you want to, if you want to pick on certain words and say how the language can justify whatever you want to say, there's a bunch of words here that you can look at, right? Consider the stage directions. For example, the part where she lights a cigarette. Why does Auntie Karima's action communicate? What does Auntie Karima's action communicate to the audience about her character? Do you notice anything interesting about the contrasting language? Remember what I said in class the other day? Oh wait, did I say it in our class? I don't know. Humans are walking contradictions. We say one thing, we do another. We believe one thing, but we do other things, right? This is all part of being human, right? So pay attention to Auntie Karima in this particular part. Right? What does her action communicate to the audience about her as character? And is there anything interesting about the contrasting language? Contrasting language, she's talking in a tidbits, she says things like, she says Alhamdulillah, and then she says, in the same part of her dialogue, she's using swear words, she's using colloquialisms, slang language. Get what I'm saying? Also, there's another part that I'm just remembering. If you go back to an earlier part in the play where she says, this girl, she thought she could do damn well she pleases. And then look what she says towards the end of that dialogue that she's having. She says, basically she says like, I did everything right, or whatever you want to call it, right? And look at me now. I'm happy now. I got a TV, I got a house, I got this and that and this and that. She's trying to say, hey, look, that her life has played out in a certain way because she has followed, or conformed, or whatever you want to call it, right? But I won't strictly say in that sense, right? I'm just trying to understand why is she saying all of those things. Is she trying to justify the situation? I don't think so. Rather, she's just trying to make sense of what has happened, and she's trying to relate to it. So in her trying to relate to this, she's obviously thinking about her life, right? And that's where she ends up thinking about her mother's death, right? Discuss the effect of the line, while the woman went inside to make pies and tea and sandwiches with their grief. Consider what it communicates about the role of women in Auntie Karima's youth, contrasted with the men in her life. At the time when she's recalling her mom's funeral, and she says that the woman went inside to make pies with their grief, while and the men carried on with the funeral rites. Um, what can we take away from this? What does this tell of the role of woman, right? In certain cultures, right? Would we say that I mean, some of you might say that a woman's role is being reduced to being that of being in the kitchen or so and so. Some of you may say that that these when they say the woman went inside to make pies and tea and sandwiches with their grief, this is also, you might argue the other way. You can say that this is the woman and this is their sacred space where they connect and bond with each other, and they process things that they can't otherwise would process. That we get a sense of sisterhood, or whatever you want to call it, fraternity, whatever you want to call it, from that, right? But I want you to pay attention to the role of woman in Auntie Karima's youth, contrasted with the men in her life, right? Also remember that Auntie Karima, her father, who was a 40-year-old man, married her mom when she was very young. She was 16, which in past tense was totally cool, right? Contrasted with the men in her life. I also want you to think about her grandfather, who said that she must marry whoever he wants her to marry, right? Which is it's first of all, it's not an Islamic thing, right? Second of all, I mean, who is one person to dictate who another should marry, right? Even if it's their father or mother, all right? This is intense patriarchy, right? Discuss the language used in the stage direction itself. Consider the contrast between "sits down heavily and lights up." There's a contrast that "sits down heavily and lights up," right? The heavy thought, the heavy grief, the heavy intensity, and the lights up, the processing of the grief, the catharsis, right? What are the connotations of each of these words as actions, and how do they contribute to your understanding of Auntie Karima's narrative arc? Right? So this is, you can write a paragraph about this and just go into your report, right? Compare this moment with an earlier or later one in the play. What is similar and what's different, right? There are a few things we went through. I touched on some where you can compare. You can compare her to the struggle that Tahira Hussein is going through. You can compare it to Aisha's struggle in her formation of identity, being a black Muslim girl who she seems to be quite rebellious, but she seems to be very interested in these ideas. Or she has a Marxist belief, right? But she's also a contradiction herself, because she goes and she says that the person asks her, "So where did you get those takis from?" And she says, "I got them from Cavendish," right? All about contradictions, right? Identify 3 main points you'd like to make in response to the essay question. 3 main points is, right, that you'd like to make in response to the essay question. Write a clear statement that summarizes each point. Use these statements as the opening statements. Use these statements as the opening sentences of 3 main paragraphs in your essay. Right? So it's basically laying out the structure here for you. 3 main paragraphs, 3 main points. Your 3 main points will expand to 3 big paragraphs, okay? And that should be the meat of your essay. And whatever else more will you add to that to explain yourself without going overboard, obviously, should be a good idea, right? So we have to play, and I've gone through the essay requirements with you, and I've touched on some of the tidbits that you can unpack in more detail later. So I hope that's been beneficial with you, and I think it will be it's always helpful when we are tutorials and when you guys we're having questions and going back and forth, because I think it improves your understanding. But I think if you pay attention to what I've gone through now and just some of the things that I've explained, that it's not everything that's been given to you there, but what I've tried to do is point you in the direction of interest. You may find other things interesting that you would want to include and talk about, right? But I've just given you a sense of how to look at things and how to approach the understanding of things, right? And now you can improve upon this understanding. There are, there's some articles that are there, if you want to just take some academic text, right? Because this is something that you'll do more and more the further you go in university. And so I'll just post some of them on the group if you want to read through and go through, where you might want to take, there's people who've done critical readings of this, there's people who have done a thesis on this, so you might find some interesting things there, right? But it's not that that shouldn't form the focal part of your work. That you should be relying on this, on the story, and especially on the extract, but most especially your own understanding. That is the most important thing, right? But yeah, okay, my headphones is dead. Okay, so I think that should be enough for me to go through. And what we can do is, for those who would like to have a makeup tutorial, we can discuss when to schedule a time. Otherwise, we can do a mass consultation or something. Maybe we can do something on Google Meets, so I can go over the questions that you might have for me. And so I will, if you guys have any feedback for me, you can let me know. Otherwise, I will send an email tomorrow saying what we're going to do. Right. So there it is. And I will see you next week in class, where we will talk a bit more about this in the beginning for a bit before we go on to the next tutorial. Remember, this assignment is due on the 24th of April. It says here, write an essay 1,000 words, but some of you will go more than that, which is fine, right? Your main thing is to make sure you've met the requirements of the question. You do that, you should be good. You shouldn't get below 60, 65 if you follow all the instructions right. It's best to plan your work, plan it, put it in a certain order, criticize it, proofread it a couple of times before you submit the final product, right? Right. If you guys have any comments, questions, or inquiries, you can email me or post in the WhatsApp group, and we can discuss things. If there's anything that is confusing for you especially, please don't hesitate to make it known to me. I'm here to help you, and we will go through it, whatever it is, maybe. Okay? Remember, when you ask a question, somebody else in the class might also have that same question. So you asking it and bring it out in the open may be beneficial to everyone involved, right? So yeah, I'll leave that with you, and if there's any responses, I'll be looking forward to them. I will see you guys on Thursday. Have a good rest of the week, and even back to all those who are celebrating.